Hi, everyone. My name's Abby Speight. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Zynga.org. At Zynga.org, our mission is to make the world a better place through games. And one of the primary pillars of how we do that is working with Zynga game studios to bring social impact into games that already have really robust DAU bases and really engaged players. And we've seen a lot of success with that approach. In our 150 social impact campaigns so far, we've raised about $18 million just through player giving. So we're really encouraged by the opportunities there. And I'm joined on stage by a few other folks who are working in that same space. And we're just going to share some insight into the opportunities of bringing together commercial games and social impact. So I'd like to start by just everybody taking a minute to introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name's Jude Ower. Is this mic working? Yeah. I'm the founder of a company called PlayMob. We're based in London and San Francisco. We're doing kind of a similar work to Zynga.org, where we've got an open platform for existing games to connect to causes in a way that provides mutual value to each partner, the charity and the developer. So through in-game items that players can purchase or through in-game actions will lead to donations. And getting players to work towards reaching a common goal together, learning about causes and also making an impact for the cause by being able to give back and do good. So that's what our business is based around. We started about 3 years ago. We've raised about over $300,000 so far. So a fraction of what the guys at Zynga.org have raised so far, but we're getting there. And we're trying to work with as many studios and publishers right now in the game space to raise $1 billion by the end of 2016.
Well, $1 billion is good up there. That's pretty. My name's Thomas Tighe. I'm the president and CEO of directrelief.org. And we're a humanitarian, international and domestic within the U.S. Medical humanitarian aid agency. Among other things, we run the largest charitable medicines program in the United States. We're one of the largest providers of medical material support to locally run humanitarian health projects around the world and are very active in emergencies. It's last year about a $400 million program, all privately funded. We work a lot with industries, the technology industry, the healthcare industry, increasingly because of Zynga, the gaming industry, which has been a powerful example of how when people get engaged in a way that makes sense for them, it's got this huge multiplier effect in bringing services and health goods and health services to people who are just kind of off the grid, not really attractive from a commercial perspective because they're poor and often just beyond the reach of what a government is willing or able to do. So that's why private philanthropy has existed. We've been around for 66 years, and I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Erin Hoffman. I'm the game design lead at the Glass Lab, which is a grant-funded nonprofit organization to bring together game developers and education experts to create formative assessment-based video games supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation. And one of the arms of what we do is to take existing games and try and unlock the existing educational potential that's already inside of them and then connect that with our assessment database and pull data out of that to empower teachers and kids. So.
Hi, I'm Oliver Miao. I'm the CEO of Pixelberry Studios. We have about 15 people in our company. I'd like to hope that we're an indie, although we launched our first game in August of last year, High School Story, and it's done much better than we were expecting. We have about 800,000 people playing it on a daily basis, and since launch, it's been in the top 100 grossing on the App Store.
Great, so first I want to talk about just bringing together these two seemingly disparate industries of nonprofits and game developers. So Thomas, can you talk about when you first heard from Zynga? That was the first game company that you worked with, and what that call was like and how you wrapped your mind around that approach.
Yeah, it was right after the Japan earthquake and tsunami a few years ago, which was an awful kind of riveting tragedy. And at Direct Relief, when these things pierce the public consciousness, we tend to get a lot of calls, people wanting to help or whatever. one of the calls we received that was quite insistent, it came to me and they said, Thomas, someone's on the phone, they're representing the mafia. And I thought, okay, well, do not offend them, whatever you do. And that's cool. And I said, okay, I don't think we can deal with this. Can you take care of it? But, the conversation kind of unfolded, and it was Mafia Wars, which I wasn't familiar with, a Zynga game. And my first reaction was, well, that sounds racially insensitive. I don't know that we should be associating ourselves with that. And Laura Hartman, who was gracious enough to bear with me, said, no, Nimrod, these are cute mafioso, and everyone has them. It's not just, they're from all over the place, and it's this wonderful game that engages millions of people, and we want to help. And so I think after overcoming that initial, but really understanding the reach and the genuine desire of someone who was involved with a company that had much bigger reach than Direct Relief had, it was, the more I learned and just the power of the reach and the tools and the talent within Zynga, I mean the engineers, the designers, that they wanted to help. And so what unfolded was, within Mafia Wars, they had developed a Japanese fan that was a virtual good that players could purchase, and all of the money with respect to the purchase with real money would come to Direct Relief. So it was kind of a frictionless fundraising effort from our perspective, and 100,000 people bought a $6 fan, so $600,000 later, which was a tremendous, in a few days, example to us of just how powerful this could be, and how riding on the backbone of something that was already successful and engaging the talent, which was lightning fast. About the designers and the folks at Zynga who got involved was kind of the first example. And since there have been 24 more campaigns launched in emergencies that have, why do nonprofits raise money? It's not an end in itself. The purpose of money is to convert it into goods and services for something, in our case, humanitarian. So the effect in the real world of Zynga's team engaging and their players engaging has been literally a lot of places rebuilt in Japan, tens of thousands of people getting services, a broad childhood pneumonia campaign in Liberia that has reduced the level of pneumonia, death from childhood pneumonia by 85% in 1 year. And that goes direct, that's a straight line from people engaging to money, converting money to goods and services in a place they otherwise simply would not have reached. So it was a steep learning curve for me, but a wonderful realization when I got there. Thank you.
And Oliver, for you, it was a different approach. You sort of had the idea yourself, and then had to look for the right way to find a partner to bring it to life.
Right. So a month after our game was released, I was actually reading some news articles, and one really resonated with me. It was about a girl, Rebecca Sedgwick, who had committed suicide because she was cyberbullied. And I was bullied myself in junior high. And as I talked to other people in our studio, we realized that many of us had kind of this common theme running through our childhood. And we realized that we had a platform that reached a lot of teenagers and that we could actually use our game to do good for that. So we started trying to reach out to different nonprofits related to cyberbullying. And we'd send emails, we'd try and call people, and we actually got 0 responses from anyone. I think nonprofits weren't used to game companies reaching out to them, and they didn't think we could actually make a difference. And that's where PlayMob actually came in, and I'll let Jude kind of continue the story.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Jude, you bridge these two worlds, the nonprofit world and the developer world. So can you talk a little bit about how you bring those two approaches together?
Yeah, sure. So what we do is we match up games to charities, but there's multiple variables that have to be taken into consideration. And we spent 2 years working in the games industry trying to figure out how's the best way to position a charitable campaign, and looking at the business impact as well as the social impact. And on the other side, looking at the charity space and how we work with charities to make them realize the potentials and the benefits of working within games. Some charities we would go to and talk to about games, and they would hear the word game and think instantly of violence, and not think about like the 95% of other games that are not violent. the family-friendly games with a huge audience that they could tap into. And it was just, like Abby said, it was two worlds that had never been brought together before. So we really try and work in the middle to be that matchmaker and find the right match. So when Oliver approached us, we'd actually just signed up a cyberbullying charity in the UK, Cybersmile, and they were the perfect match. The campaign has been hugely successful. The charity has been able to go on to open up more helplines and help thousands of young people just in the past 4 months, or 5 months now, to receive help. So it's not just fueling money into the charity to open up new helplines, but also raising awareness for these kids that are playing Oliver's game to learn about where they can get help. So really our jobs are to just make sure we find the right fit and to maintain the campaigns and make sure that both sides are getting what they need out of it. So making the social impact and the business impact valuable for both sides.
Great, thanks. And then Aaron, working on SimCity EDU, it was a slightly different flavor of this. And so you had the opportunity to take a commercially successful game and leverage it for educational purposes. I imagine that there were some challenges and some opportunities there as opposed to starting from scratch and building a game maybe inspired by SimCity, but building it explicitly for educational purposes. So can you talk about that choice and the factors that went into it?
Sure. So, I mean, we set out with the lab to have that dual goal, both to engage the game development community and commercial video games in this purpose of education for actually several different reasons. Computers and video games actually have a history of teaching technology skills just by being what they are. So to be able to get them into classrooms is a very powerful thing. The opportunity was huge just because I think you can make an argument that SimCity, the new SimCity, is the most sophisticated toy that's ever been built. And it's just mesmerizing to look at, and yet it's very real and very empowering. So SimCity had this background, and partly because Maxis as a culture had a history of making games and wanting to be in education, making simulations of things that were real, that it just had this intuitive leap. Well, of course you can learn from SimCity, and we had the engagement of the kids right away too. But that was actually part of the danger of it as well, because it was so big and so compelling that it very much wanted to be itself. And the challenge was aligning what SimCity does teach, which would be very much in the 21st century skill sort of space, with what teachers were trying to teach in their classrooms, to finding a way to get that in there and to have them be talking about things like systems thinking, which we know is a very advanced competency that is very critical for kids to acquire for their lives long term, but it doesn't exactly match to curriculums that currently exist.
One of the things you just mentioned was that kids were instantly engaged in the game because they knew and recognized SimCity. Do you think it would have been a different experience getting those students involved if it didn't have that brand recognition behind it or that kind of stamp of fun already built in?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, I mean, I think there was some recognition of SimCity, but it had been so long since there had previously been a SimCity that the middle school kids weren't so aware of it, but their parents were, which was cool. So their parents were actually, oh, I remember SimCity, I played it a lot. And so we actually saw this connection between parents and kids when they came in to play this game. But kids are this amazing radar for quality of product and polish. Like you can't fool them, especially middle school kids. And because they'll just not give you the time of day. They decide within about half a second whether something is cool or not and whether it's new. And part of the challenge that educators have today is that kids are saturated with this incredibly high definition environment, high production from movies and television and film and their iPhone games. And how does a teacher compete with that? So by capturing a piece of that and bringing it into the classroom, that was part of what we were trying to do. And it definitely made a difference, the level of investment that had been placed into SimCity, if not just the brand name itself.
Great. And so Thomas, for you as a nonprofit leader, what's unique about reaching players inside of a game environment where they're already engaged as opposed to some of the other places that you might reach new supporters or existing supporters?
Yeah, I think nonprofits, like any sector, kind of lapse into their own language. So if you came out and you said, my mission is to be in grassroots, participatory, evidence-based engagement for the advancement of, people think you're a part of a cult. No one knows what you're talking about. It sounds boring. It's like, it's jargon. And I think the more time you spend with people in the same industry, I think gaming probably has it. I'm a lawyer by education. God knows they have it. So I think these wonderful underlying qualities that we just have as people, that kids understand. So your job is to help people who are poor? Yes, thank you for reminding me that. That's hard to break through for all the reasons Aaron said. And so for a nonprofit trying to figure out how to reach out on their terms with language that they want, that makes sense to them, so therefore they want everyone to understand on their own terms, it's a really limited reach. And so when you have folks who are very finely attuned with what works, what connects with people on an emotional level, on a visual level, on an artistic level, on a fun level, and you can apply that learning to some of these things that aren't really compelling from a business perspective, or even a fun perspective. Obstetric fistula that affects a lot of women who are only destitute is not a fun subject. It's a compelling subject. It's a deeply motivating subject, but it's not one that you can make money out of because the people who suffer from it are poor, but it's deeply compelling from a human perspective. So when you have folks who, and Ken and you and the team at Zynga who get that, sign me up for that, because we care about it, and we're good at these other things, whether it's the folks who developed the engagement at SimCity, that's powerful, and that unlocks kind of these talents that people have and applies them to things that otherwise wouldn't be focused on from a straight business perspective. As much as I would like to say what I do has a clear business plan and business objective behind it, you cannot make that case for people who are living in deep poverty and just need help. So you have to engage folks through other means, whatever means necessary, as long as it doesn't cross some ethical line, I think, and nowhere is that more, that potential more powerful and obvious than in the gaming industry that has attracting a lot of the current talent in our world today, applying it to all the techniques and features that have to be a successful game. To bring that to bear against some of these issues affecting the poor is wonderful. Is that close to answering? I don't know if I answered your question, but I was feeling it, so I kept going. Sorry.
You were. That was great. That was great. It is an interesting challenge to bridge that gap of getting really in depth on your approach and your mission and your strategy as a nonprofit, and trying to communicate that in a way that's not. That's additive and not disruptive from the game experience for players. And so it's great to have partners that you work with repeatedly, so you kind of hone that together. And Jude, you've built your business around this idea of games is a great place to introduce players to new causes and to get them involved with new organizations. What's the hope that you see there? What sparked that idea?
It was really looking at kind of gameplay and the communities coming together to work together to reach a common goal. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing when you're fundraising in a game, and really kind of using the game narrative to weave in the charitable content, the impact that you're trying to make. So, I mean, ultimately what we want to do is, if you look at what you guys are doing at Zynga, if we can get the whole industry coming together to do what, like what we are doing, we could have such a huge impact. So, I mean, really it kind of came about from, our chairman, Ian Livingston, who's the creator of Lara Croft. I met him in 2010 and asked him the question, what's the games industry doing for CSR? And he asked me what CSR was. So I thought, okay, right. So I explained, and, I said to him, I'd love to figure out ways to be able to link causes into games. And he said, well, if you come up with an idea, come back to me and let me know. So, a year later, I'd come up with the idea for PlayMob and went back to him, and he became our chairman. But the thinking around, when I was talking to him then, when he didn't know what CSR was, it kind of made us realize that the games industry it's such a new industry. There's still a lot of education in the game space to be able to get the, more people involved. And it really does come down to the individuals as well. We say in our office all the time, we wish there's more Olivers. Because, it's a real genuine intent, and the way that it's wrapped into the game, the long-term strategic objectives of a game, of a studio, is what makes it really powerful. We've got a few campaigns that are happening, that are coming together over the next few months, which are, we're starting to see the more longer-term strategic campaigns coming into play with long-term goals with charities. to look at, what is the impact that we want to make, and, working back from that to be able to weave that into the gameplay. So I think there's a lot more, strategic intent that's happening rather than kind of one-off campaigns.
And for the player experience, is the fictional fit of a cause with a game most important, or is it about just what the activation looks like, or what have you found to be the kind of special sauce of a successful campaign?
I think for each campaign, because it's different partnerships and there's different outputs, it's there's multiple variables that you have to work with. So what is the audience that the charity is trying to reach, or what is the audience of the game itself? So looking at the game, the demographics, where they are, who they are, what the game content is, how the charity content could be weaved into the game. There's so many different variables that I guess you can't really say that there's a secret sauce. I think if we look at High School Story as an example, I mean the perfect fit there was.
That's the secret sauce right there.
Yeah. Was that my time up? I think the secret sauce there was, it's a cause that, the kids who play High School Story feel passionate about, and it's the right demographic to be putting that cause in front of in a way that isn't preachy, but it's, as part of the game content, it's a quest, it's items that you can purchase, and it's a real relevant topic for them. And in other games that we've worked with as well, it's, we've listened to the player feedback and sometimes kind of altered the campaign with working with different charities to kind of see, what works best, or just responding to players and what they want to support. But it's it really does depend on, the partnerships, and no one campaign is ever the same as the next.
And that's another great segue to Oliver. You've heard some really powerful customer service feedback from your players through your Cyber Smile campaign. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from them, and kind of, you've talked about the wide-reaching impact of touching a lot of players and exposing them to the cause, but there's been some real depth of impact as well. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. So I guess there's two things. First, from a general perspective, players have told us that the game and the cyberbullying quest we've written has really resonated with them. They love the fact that we're tackling a subject that either they've encountered or their friends have encountered, and they've said it's actually made the game better. The other thing is we've had messages directly from players or from CyberSmile who've told us, CyberSmile gave us a message where they had just helped a player who reached out to CyberSmile because of our game, and that player was basically texting with CyberSmile while they were on the roof of their house, and they were contemplating suicide, and they were able to talk to a counselor, reconsider their decision, and talk to a parent. For ourselves, while we were in the middle of writing our cyberbullying quest, we had a player reach out to us and tell us that she was planning to kill herself. And as a game developer, if you receive a message like that, it's something you're not prepared for, right? We're experts at game design, at art, at engineering. At being able to counsel a high school student, it's something we don't have any training for. And so we ended up calling the National Suicide Helpline. They urged us to get the player professional help. But at the same time, we didn't want to just tell them, go to another resource. We wanted them to know that we cared about them, because clearly they had a connection with the game, which is why they were able to tell us about something like that. Fortunately, a week later, after exchanging messages with her, she told us that she was getting help and that it was our game that was the reason why she was still there. And that's actually why we kind of redoubled our efforts to look for a nonprofit to work with. And that's when Jude's organization actually contacted us, and it was a perfect fit. And as a result, we wrote our cyberbullying questline with CyberSmile so that we made sure we were imparting the right messages from within our game.
And you've also facilitated ways for players to connect directly with CyberSmile and seen pretty incredible engagement there as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. Every week, over 100 players contact CyberSmile directly because of our game. And those are often teens who are either being bullied are self-hurting or are thinking about teen suicide.
It's a really amazing example, I think, and from the social impact and from the player experience side, it's clearly kind of a best in pack example. For you as a developer who at the end of the day, you do have to think about your business and about your sustainability, what's the experience been like for you, and what results have you seen?
That's a great question. So we started the campaign planning to run it for 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the max. And we just had such great feedback from our players that we decided to keep it going. In the very short term when we were running the campaign, it was definitely a revenue positive thing. Longer term, if you're only looking at the amount of money that is going to CyberSmile that potentially could have gone into Pixelberry's pockets, it's probably been negative for us. But if you consider everything from a holistic perspective, and not just counting, all the kids we're helping, but if you look at player retention, player loyalty, how much more they care about our game, and you also look at how good the employees feel about working on a game where they're making a difference, all those things combined definitely make it a positive thing, which is why we're continuing to run the campaign. And so far, we've raised over $250,000 for CyberSmile.
That's great. And Jude, I know those type of metrics for the value for your developer partners are really important to you all. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing there, what the benefits are for developers who use this model? I think we need to get you the microphone.
So there's an interesting study that I kind of touched on briefly earlier with you, and Oracle have been doing some broad research on games that have integrated charity, and they've been looking at their social marketing platform and the results from there, and what they've seen is across a broad spectrum of games, there's about a 10 times increase of player engagement and a 10 times increase of virality, meaning that players are more likely to talk about what they did because it's resulted in a good action. So if you buy an item in a game and it's not linked to charity, you're less likely to talk about that than one that is given back, because you want to tell your friends that you're doing good. You post it on Twitter, you post it on Facebook, and that's kind of generally what we see. One of the outputs that we've seen as well on the business side has been players who wouldn't normally spend in game will spend. Now that varies depending on game and campaign as well, but that's a big thing for games that are working in the freemium space as well, is you're engaging players so much that they're willing to spend money on the items that are given back to charity. And they'll continue to spend as well. So what we see is about a third of the people participating in campaigns will continue to spend outside of the game as well, because they have got this good feeling towards the game, this kind of warm, fuzzy feeling because they're doing good, they're part of something amazing, and we've, if you look at kind of cause marketing general statistics, more people will, spend more money on products that are linked back to good causes, because they want to reward the companies for taking the good action, for being able to allow the consumer, the player, to be able to give back through something that they were doing anyway. So you do see these jumps in how many people are talking about the game, how many people play, and how long they play for. But again, it does depend on the campaign and how well it's done. And Oliver and his team have done a fantastic job in High School Story, because they put out messages every so often. It's not the sort of thing that you can just put a charity logo on and hope for the best. It has to be well thought through, and you have to keep reminding the players about it as well, because you will have new players that come to the game, or what we've seen as well is re-engagement. So a player might download a game, play it, and they might forget about it, but if there's a cause that's taken place and they're reminded about it, it's a good way to kind of bring them back into the game, to get them to participate in the cause with the other players, and tell their friends about it too. So that's kind of some of the business impact side that we've seen.
Great. And Aaron, for you, it was a slightly different challenge in that you were, the game was built to be used in classrooms. And so your customer base was really the educators, the teachers, the administrators. And I can imagine having a commercially recognizable game could be both an asset in that regard. They trust that there's going to be quality there and that it'll be fun. But it could also raise some skeptics who might say, what does SimCity know about education? So can you talk about that dichotomy and how that served you?
Yeah, I think
at least I personally, as a developer, was expecting more skepticism than we received from the market. I just think that teachers are under such phenomenal pressure from assessment, from the whole environment, to engage their kids. That pain that they have is so intense that when they see that there's a way that they can map SimCity into their curriculum, they are incredibly motivated to try and make that happen. There are other barriers that we've run into with bandwidth and the need to be online and system requirements and things like that, because SimCity is this kind of Ferrari of video games that really needs a lot of power behind it. The skepticism has only come from the political sphere, and I think that that's always going to be an issue, because if somebody can kind of make an argument that sounds plausible, they're not talking to teachers, they're not talking to kids, they're not on the ground with them where the need is there. So we've encountered that for sure, but it's a very different thing.
So for teachers, it sounds like making it fit into the context of their classrooms and making it realistic for them to integrate into their schedules and their classes was the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are under a lot of scheduling pressure as well. So the time that it takes to ramp up on the software itself is definitely an issue. So we have to really try and flatten that curve as much as possible. And the exciting thing is that it's new. The hard thing is that it's new, right? You have to find some way to make the time to work it into your class.
So to wrap up, I think, and since we've got so many different folks in the room with different backgrounds and different approaches to this type of work, and same on the stage, can you all just give maybe your soundbite of somebody in your position who's toying around with the idea of trying to bring social impact into a commercial game? What would your quick advice be to them? I guess, Oliver, we can start with you and come this way.
So for me, I think the number one thing would be make a game that's fun first, and then you start layering in the education elements.
From Glass Lab, we really want game developers to think about the educational applications of their games. So I think it's something that game developers don't think about very often, both the charitable potential in their user base and how they can speak to users more clearly, and also just the affordance, we would say, of the game itself. It's usually a lot more than we think, because we tend to think about education as being arithmetic and things like that, and it's so much more than that. So just thinking about it helps.
I'm all for it. So, I think, why wouldn't you do it? Right. I mean, it's not, I think to get over, the false dichotomy that should we do something that's good and fun is going to be profitable, or should we do something that's, good for humanity? There's no such need to make that distinction. And I think if we don't engage the best minds and the people who know how to make things fun and engaging and understand systems and have a broad reach, forget about these vexing problems that have confronted humanity for a long time. Right now, they have a better chance of being solved than ever before if, the engagement from the people who, like you, who are involved in this dynamic industry, get engaged. If not, the counterfactual is kind of bleak. So, therefore, you must, right? Thank you.
I think one of the key values that we have is transparency, and that can really link to the campaign itself and engagement with the players to show the impact that they're directly making. So in each campaign, what we do is we work with the charities to look at what is the impact that's going to be made from the money that's raised, and make sure that we tell that back to the players, because that continues the story, and it continues the working towards a shared common goal, and what players are directly impacting to. If players aren't seeing how much is being raised, or where the money's going, or how the money will impact the cause, it could leave a bad feeling. But the more transparency you can give to a player, the more engaged they'll become. So for me, be as transparent as you possibly can. Work with your charity partners and make sure you know not exactly how every penny is going to be spent, but get a general idea of how it will be spent to give that story back to the player, because it's a great story for your game as well, to show how many wells you were able to build, or how many people you've helped, or how many trees that you planted, and it could lead to a great press story, more awareness for the game. So it has all this knock on, but key thing for me is transparency.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think, Thomas, you kind of hit the nail on the head of it shouldn't have to be a choice. And so you can build a great game and maybe not even set out to build a game that's going to be educational or that's going to raise money or awareness for causes. And that potential could be built in there. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to keep an eye out for that and for nonprofits to bug game developers to include them. And thank you all for your perspectives.